The mountain roads twisted like veins through the pine forest, damp with early morning mist. Irene Ofilia tightened her grip on the steering wheel of her aging pickup truck, her knuckles pale beneath the worn leather gloves. The faded sign at the side of the gravel road read, "For sale, old Birch Cabin, $25, as is." "As is," she murmured under her breath, a mix of disbelief and curiosity tugging at her. Who sold a cabin for the price of a meal? It sounded like either a blessing or a curse. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. She wasn't new to either. At 29, Irene had seen her share of losses. Her parents had died young, her marriage had ended in silence, and her small-town photography business had folded after a flood destroyed most of her work. Moving to the mountains wasn't part of a grand plan. It was survival. The ad had appeared online 2 weeks ago, accompanied by a single photo of a cabin almost swallowed by moss and trees. Most people would have scrolled past. Irene had felt something stir inside her instead. Maybe, she thought, some things are meant to find the broken ones. The cabin appeared at the edge of the clearing, a sagging, forgotten structure leaning into itself, like an old soul weary from carrying too many winters. The porch was crooked, the door hanging slightly ajar. The forest had reclaimed the place. Ivy crept up the stone chimney, and the roof was freckled with patches of rot. But Irene didn't flinch. To her, it wasn't ruin, it was possibility. She parked the truck and stepped out into the crisp mountain air. Silence enveloped her, broken only by the distant call of a raven. Her boots crunched over fallen pine needles as she approached the porch. The air smelled of wood smoke and damp earth, a scent she found strangely comforting. The front door creaked when she pushed it open. A swirl of dust rose in the beam of sunlight cutting through the cracked window. The cabin's interior was small. A single main room with a stone fireplace, a rusted stove, and a loft ladder leading to the sleeping area above. Broken furniture lay scattered like forgotten memories. She smiled faintly. "All right, old girl, let's see what you've got left." Her voice echoed softly through the empty space. She walked around, noting what needed repair. Floorboards near the kitchen sink were rotted, the chimney was half collapsed, and the walls bore claw marks, probably raccoons or a bear that had wandered in. Yet underneath the decay, there was still a frame of strength, a story waiting to be retold. When she found the small trapdoor beneath a loose board in the corner, she thought little of it first. Mountain cabins often had cellars, places to store wood, tools, or jars of preserves. She crouched down, brushed the dirt away, and found a rusted handle. It groaned as she pulled. The trapdoor lifted slowly, exhaling a breath of cold, damp air. Irene hesitated. Her flashlight was still in the truck, but curiosity pushed her forward. She peered down into darkness. Wooden steps descended into a small cellar, barely lit by thin streaks of sunlight that managed to pierce through the cracks in the floorboards. She could smell earth, old wood, and something else, something faintly metallic. She climbed down, careful with each step. The air grew colder, the silence thicker. Her boots landed on the dirt floor, and she turned in a slow circle. Shelves lined the stone walls, empty jars, old tools, a rusted lantern. Then she noticed the far side of the cellar, where the dirt was freshly disturbed. Someone had been down there not long ago. Her pulse quickened. "Hello?" she called softly, her voice bouncing against the walls. Silence. Then she heard it. A soft sound, a whimper, so quiet she thought she imagined it. She froze, straining to listen. Another sound followed, a muffled cough. Irene's stomach dropped. It was coming from behind the stack of crates near the far wall. She grabbed the lantern, found a small box of matches on a nearby shelf, and struck one. The weak orange flame flickered to life, casting trembling shadows across the dirt floor. Behind the crates, a pair of wide eyes blinked at her from the dark. she gasped and stumbled backward. Oh my God. The eyes belonged to a child, a girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, her hair tangled and cheeks streaked with dirt. The girl flinched at the light, retreating slightly. Behind her, 2 smaller figures stirred, another child, a boy about 6, and a toddler barely old enough to stand, clutching the older girl's hand. Please? The girl whispered, her voice hoarse. Don't make us leave. For a moment, Irene couldn't move. Her heart pounded in her ears. The air in the cellar seemed to vanish, replaced by the unbearable weight of confusion and disbelief. Children here? In a cabin no one wanted, miles from town? She knelt slowly, setting the lantern down. Hey, it's okay, she said softly. My name's Irene. What are you doing down here? The little girl looked at her brother, then back at Irene. We live here. Live here? Irene echoed, her mind spinning. Where are your parents? The girl didn't answer. Her lip trembled. The toddler began to whimper, clutching his sister tighter. Irene's instincts kicked in, motherly, protective, fierce. She shrugged off her jacket and draped it over the youngest child. Shh, it's all right, she murmured. You're safe now. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light, she saw more details. The worn blankets laid on the dirt, a few empty cans of food, an old water jug half filled. These kids had been surviving down there for days, maybe weeks. Irene swallowed hard. How long have you been here? The girl hesitated, then whispered, Since Mama went to get food. She didn't come back. The words hit Irene like a punch to the chest. The silence stretched. Outside, the forest wind moaned through the trees as if mourning something unseen. Irene rose, forcing herself to think clearly. Okay, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. You're all coming upstairs. It's too cold down here. The children obeyed, cautious but trusting enough to follow. Irene led them up into the main room, where the pale sunlight filtered through the broken window panes. The little boy clung to her arm. The toddler reached for the lantern light like it was something magical. Once they were seated on the dusty couch, Irene stepped back, unsure what to do next. She had come to the mountains to rebuild her own life, not to stumble into someone else's tragedy. Yet, as she watched the 3 children huddled together, shivering and scared, she knew one thing for certain. Whatever had brought her here, it wasn't chance. She ladled the soup into old tin mugs and passed them around. The children devoured it in silence. Watching them, Irene felt an ache in her chest she hadn't felt in years. She'd always wanted children, but after her marriage fell apart, that dream had faded into something she didn't let herself think about. Now, here she was, in a broken cabin she'd bought for $25, feeding 3 orphans she'd found hidden beneath the floor. When the meal was done, she brought out blankets from her truck, old, patched, but warm, and spread them on the floor near the fire. You can sleep here tonight, she said gently. Tomorrow morning, we'll go down to town and get you help, okay? At that, Leela stiffened. No, she said quickly. We can't go. Irene blinked. What do you mean, you can't? She said we have to stay hidden, Leela whispered. Mama said bad people were looking for us. The words hung in the air like frost. Irene stared at her. Bad people. Leela nodded. Her voice shook. They came one night. Mama said they wanted something Daddy found in the woods. She told us not to open the cellar door unless she came back. A chill slid through Irene that had nothing to do with the mountain air. What did your dad find? She asked softly. Leela looked toward the trapdoor. I don't know, but Mama said it was dangerous. For a long moment,
The only sound was the crackle of the fire. Irene forced a smile, though her mind was racing. "You're safe here now," she said. "No one's going to hurt you." Leela didn't look convinced, but exhaustion finally pulled her down. One by one, the children drifted into uneasy sleep, curled beneath the blankets by the fire. Irene stayed awake, sitting in a wooden chair near the window, staring out into the dark forest beyond. The moonlight glinted off the wet leaves, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. She couldn't shake the feeling they weren't alone. By morning, the fog had thickened. Irene stepped onto the porch, wrapping her coat tight around her shoulders. The forest was silent except for the dripping of dew from the pines. She spotted faint footprints in the mud, fresh ones leading up from the trail. Someone had been near the cabin during the night. Her stomach twisted. She followed the prints a few yards before they vanished into the undergrowth. Maybe it was just an animal, or maybe not. When she returned inside, Leela was awake, sitting upright and alert. "Did you see him?" she asked. "See who?" "The man," she said quietly. "He comes sometimes, at night. Mama used to stay awake to keep him away." Her pulse thundered. "What man, Leela?" "The one with the scar," she whispered. "He said Daddy took something that wasn't his, and that he'd come back for us." Outside, a branch snapped. Irene turned toward the sound, her heart in her throat. Through the broken window, she saw a shadow move at the edge of the trees. Tall, deliberate, watching. For a moment, she froze. Then instinct took over. She grabbed the poker from the fireplace and stepped in front of the children. "Stay behind me," she hissed. The shadow shifted. The figure seemed to study the cabin for a long moment, then disappeared into the trees. Irene's breath came fast and shallow. Whoever that was, they weren't lost. They knew exactly where to find this cabin. And suddenly, Irene realized buying the cabin for $25 wasn't a coincidence. Someone wanted her here. The next morning, the mountain fog clung to the trees like breath on glass. Irene Ofilia didn't sleep at all. Every sound in the woods had her on edge: the crack of a branch, the whisper of wind through pine needles. She sat in a chair by the window, the poker still clutched in her hand, watching the faint trail where she had seen the shadow disappear. By sunrise, the children stirred. Leela blinked awake first, her brown eyes wary and haunted. Evan rubbed his eyes, yawning, and Tommy whimpered softly, searching for the stuffed rabbit that had fallen from his grasp. Irene crouched beside them, her voice calm though her chest was tight. "It's morning. We'll make breakfast, then I need to talk to you about something important." She cooked quietly, instant oatmeal and the last of the bottled water. She didn't tell them about the man she had seen again at dawn, standing just beyond the tree line. He hadn't approached, only watched. But the way he moved, still, patient, deliberate, made every instinct in her scream danger. When the children had eaten, she asked softly, "Leela, this man you told me about, the one with the scar, what did he want from your father?" The girl hesitated, glancing toward the others. "Mama said Daddy found something in the woods, near the old mine. She said it wasn't gold, but it was worth more than gold. The man wanted it." "Do you know what it was?" Leela shook her head. "But Mama hid it before she left. She told me to protect the boys and never tell anyone where she went." Irene exhaled slowly. There were abandoned mines scattered through the Birchwood Range. Some collapsed, some rumored to be cursed or haunted. If the father had stumbled on something valuable there, gemstones, relics, or worse, a desperate man might have killed for it. Her gaze drifted toward the trapdoor. Could the thing they were hiding from still be somewhere under this cabin? Before she could ask more, a sound came from outside. Knocking. 3 slow, heavy knocks against the cabin door. The children froze. Evan's mug slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. Irene's heart pounded. She motioned for them to stay silent, then approached the door quietly. The wood was thin, the old lock barely holding. Through the gap in the planks, she saw him, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark coat and a hat pulled low. "Miss?" The voice was gravelly, deep, too casual to be harmless. "You the new owner of this place?" Irene didn't move. "I saw your truck out front. Didn't think anyone lived here. Mind if I ask a few questions?" Her throat felt dry. "Who are you?" she called through the door. "Name's Hollis," he said after a pause. "I work for the Forestry Service. There have been reports of trespassers. Just wanted to make sure everything's all right." Something in his tone set off alarms in her gut. Too smooth, too practiced. "I'm fine," she said shortly. "No trespassers here." A long silence followed. Then, "You sure about that?" Her fingers tightened on the poker. Finally, his boots crunched on the gravel as he stepped back from the porch. "If you see anyone," he said, his voice fainter now, "you tell me. I'll be around." She waited until his footsteps faded completely before she dared breathe again. When she turned, Leela was standing by the hearth, her face pale. "That was him," she whispered. "The man. With the scar." Irene's pulse thundered in her ears. That night, she didn't light a fire. The cabin stayed cold and dark as the children slept. Irene sat by the window again, eyes scanning the woods. She had locked the door and pushed the table against it, but she knew it wouldn't stop a determined man. Her mind raced through possibilities. She could drive to town, but the tires were half sunk in mud, and the road was narrow and steep. She couldn't risk getting stranded halfway with 3 children. And yet, staying here might be worse. She reached for her phone, but there was no signal. Not even a single bar. "Of course," she muttered bitterly. The mountains swallowed everything. Sound, light, and communication alike. The wind shifted, carrying a faint metallic smell again. The same scent she had noticed in the cellar. She rose and lifted the trapdoor carefully. The air that drifted up was colder than before, and somehow wrong. Lantern in hand, she descended the wooden steps. The light flickered against the damp stone walls. She checked the crates again. Something glinted behind them, something half buried in the dirt. She knelt and brushed the soil away. A small metal box emerged, rusted, heavy, sealed with a strange emblem etched on the lid. Not a lock exactly, more like a mark burned into the metal.
Irene turned it over in her hands. It wasn't gold or jewelry. It felt military, old, maybe decades. Inside, she could hear something rattle faintly. She carried it upstairs and set it on the table. Leela stirred awake, her eyes widening when she saw it. "That's Daddy's box," she whispered. "You've seen it before?" Leela nodded. "He found it in the mine. He said it was government stuff. He was going to sell it, but Mama got scared. She said people were coming for it." Irene's stomach twisted. The man, Hollis, if that was even his real name, wasn't a random trespasser. He was looking for this. She thought of the way he'd said, "You sure about that?" As though he already knew someone or something was inside. Before she could ask more, a sudden thump echoed from outside. Then another. The children bolted upright. Irene ran to the window. A light flickered between the trees, a flashlight, moving slowly closer. "He's back," Leela breathed. Irene snatched up her keys and whispered, "Get your shoes, now." They moved quickly, quietly. She wrapped Tommy in her jacket, hoisted him into her arms, and ushered the others toward the back door. The forest pressed against the cabin walls, dense and silent. She led them through the tall ferns, the flashlight still bobbing somewhere behind them. Her boots slipped in the mud, but she didn't stop. They reached the ridge where the road curved toward the abandoned mine entrance, the one half buried in vines. "In here," she whispered. Leela's eyes widened. "No, Mama said never to go near the mine." "Do you want him to find us?" she hissed. The girl hesitated, then nodded. They slipped into the narrow tunnel, the air growing colder as the light from outside faded. Inside, Irene set Tommy down and caught her breath. The mine smelled of rust and water. Drips echoed somewhere in the distance. She turned off her lantern and listened. Footsteps crunched outside, then stopped. The man was just beyond the entrance. For a long, terrible moment, there was silence. Then his voice came, soft and chilling. "I know you found the box." Irene's breath hitched. "You think you're helping those kids, but you don't know what you're holding." The children clung to her, trembling. "Stay here," Irene whispered to them. "Don't make a sound." She stepped toward the mouth of the mine, her heart pounding. Through the sliver of moonlight outside, she saw his silhouette, a man with a scar running from his temple to his jaw, a faint smirk curling his mouth. He looked straight toward the darkness where she stood and said, almost kindly, "You should have left the mountain when you had the chance."
What is that?" Evan whispered. "I don't know," Irene said, her voice shaking, "but I think it's coming from under the mountain." She turned toward the woods and froze. A figure stood by the trees, silhouetted against the fog. Hollis, the scarred man. His coat whipped in the wind, and in his hand something glinted. Metal. Sharp. He smiled. "Now you see why I said you should have left." Irene grabbed the children and bolted down the ridge. Her legs screamed in protest, but adrenaline drove her forward. Behind her, the man's footsteps followed, steady, relentless. "Lila, the mine, does it connect anywhere else? A tunnel or exit?" Lila nodded breathlessly. "There's another way out, behind the old tracks. Daddy said it goes all the way to the river." "Good. Take your brothers and run that way. Don't stop." "What about you?" "I'll slow him down." Lila hesitated, tears in her eyes. "You can't!" "Go." The girl obeyed, dragging Evan by the hand, Tommy clinging to her back. Irene turned and sprinted the other direction, toward the trees, clutching the metal box to her chest. The forest closed around her, every branch clawing at her coat. Hollis's voice echoed behind her, calm, almost amused. "Now you see why I said you should have left." She stumbled into a clearing and fell to her knees, gasping. The box slipped from her grasp and hit the ground, its lid cracked open. Inside lay not gold, not documents, but a small, crystalline shard, pulsing faintly with blue light, the same light that had erupted from the earth moments earlier. The ground beneath her feet trembled again. And then, a voice. Soft, metallic, not human. "Containment breach. Protocol active." Irene stared, horrified. The light flared brighter, and for an instant she saw something. Shapes moving beneath the soil, like veins of light spreading outward from the shard. She slammed the box shut, but it was too late. From the ridge above, Hollis shouted something she couldn't make out. Then the earth cracked open again, splitting the clearing in two. Irene scrabbled backward, the box clutched to her chest as a column of blinding light shot into the sky. The roar of the mountain drowned everything. When the light finally faded, Irene was alone in the clearing. The ground was scorched, the forest eerily still. The box lay at her side, warm to the touch. humming softly like something alive. For a moment she didn't dare open it again, but the sound inside, the rhythmic pulsing like a heartbeat, was impossible to ignore. She eased the lid open a fraction. Inside, the crystalline shard flickered softly, glowing through layers of ash and dust. Its light had dimmed since the explosion, but it still pulsed in a slow, steady rhythm, casting pale blue reflections over her trembling hands. "What are you?" she whispered. The shard thrummed once, like it had heard her. A chill rippled down her spine. She slammed the box shut and shoved it into her backpack, then scanned the forest around her. No sign of Hollis, no sound of the children. "Lila! Evan! Tommy!" She voice echoed through the trees, unanswered. Panic flared in her chest. She had told them to take the tunnel to the river, but what if they hadn't made it there? What if Hollis had found them first? She stumbled to her feet and began running downhill toward the mine. The forest seemed to shift as she moved, trees bending slightly toward her, the wind carrying faint whispers that weren't quite words. It was as if the mountain itself was awake now, watching. By the time she reached the mine entrance, the sun had risen higher, casting long spears of light across the valley. The ground near the tunnel was cracked and smoking, small fissures still glowing faintly blue. She crouched and pressed her palm against the soil. It was warm. Too warm. She ducked into the tunnel. The darkness closed in instantly, thick and damp. She found the broken lantern near the entrance, flicked it on, and followed the old tracks deeper inside. Her breath echoed off the stone walls. "Lila, it's Irene." No reply. But as she moved deeper, she began to see signs, footprints in the dust, small handprints along the wall where someone had stumbled. Relief surged through her. They'd come this way. A few minutes later, she found them. Lila and the boys were huddled near a rusted mining cart, their faces streaked with dirt and fear. When Lila saw Irene, she ran to her, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I thought you were dead," she sobbed. Irene wrapped her arms around the girl tightly. "I'm here. I'm all right." Evan tugged at her sleeve. "We saw light. It came through the ground. Then we heard a voice." Irene froze. "A voice?" He nodded. "It said something about containment, and then everything shook." Lila looked up at her. "What's happening, Miss Irene? What's in the box?" Irene glanced at her backpack. She couldn't lie anymore. Not to these children who'd already seen too much. "Something your father found," she said quietly. "Something dangerous. But I don't know what it is." Tommy sniffled. "Is it going to hurt us?" She hesitated. "Not if we get off this mountain." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't that simple. The ground trembled again beneath their feet, a deep rumble rolling through the tunnel like distant thunder. The light from her lantern flickered. Then came a sound. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. From deeper in the mine. "Run!" Irene hissed. They turned and bolted down the passage, the echo of boots following close behind. The tunnel branched, splitting into two. Irene glanced back, saw a beam of light slicing through the dark, and made a split-second choice. She ushered the children down the left passage, squeezing through a narrow opening where the rock had partially collapsed. They crawled through on hands and knees, emerging into a smaller chamber lit by shafts of sunlight filtering through cracks in the rock above. Water dripped from the ceiling, forming a shallow pool that glowed faintly blue. "The light again!" Lila gasped. "It's the same color." Irene followed her gaze and froze. Embedded in the stone walls were more shards, dozens of them, some small as pebbles, others long as her arm, all pulsing in unison like a single heartbeat. The air buzzed with energy. Evan reached out a hand, mesmerized. "It's beautiful," he said, mesmerized. "Don't touch it!" Irene snapped. But before she could pull him back, the shard nearest his hand flickered and released a pulse of light that rippled through the chamber. The air crackled, and for an instant Irene saw flashes, images that weren't her own. Men in uniforms digging into the mountain, machinery humming, a vault door sealed shut. Then an explosion of light, screams, silence.
When the vision faded, she was on her knees, gasping. The children stared at her, wide-eyed. "What happened?" Lila whispered. I don't know," Irene rubbed her temples. "I saw things. The people who were here before. They were experimenting with this." Evan's voice trembled. "Did Daddy see it too?" "I think so." A voice echoed down the tunnel behind them. "He saw more than that." Irene spun. Hollis stood in the entrance to the chamber, his flashlight beam cutting across their faces. His pistol gleamed in his hand. "Step away from the crystals," he said coldly. "You have no idea what you're holding." "Then tell me," Irene snapped. "What is it?" Hollis's jaw tightened. "It's not for you to know. It's classified material from a military experiment in 1973. The shards were never supposed to resurface. But your little family here," he gestured toward the children, "decided to dig where they shouldn't." Lila stepped forward, trembling but defiant. "You killed my dad, didn't you?" Hollis didn't answer. His silence was enough. Rage flared at Irene's chest. "You're not taking them," she said. He raised the gun. "You can't stop me." The shards around them pulsed faster, responding to the tension in the air. The hum grew into a deep vibration. The water in the pool began to ripple violently. "Stop!" Irene shouted. "You'll trigger it again." But Hollis only sneered. "It's already too late." The ground split open. A blinding wave of blue light burst outward, throwing them all off their feet. The gun flew from Hollis's hand and skidded across the stone. Irene crawled toward the children, pulling them close as the light swallowed everything. Then, silence. When she opened her eyes, Hollis was gone. The walls of the chamber shimmered faintly, but the shards were dim now, quiet, as if spent. Lila clung to her. "What happened?" Irene looked around dazed. "I think it saved us." But even as she said it, she felt a strange warmth in her pocket, the box, vibrating softly as though something inside it was awakening. She didn't know what the shard truly was, or what it wanted. But she did know one thing. Whatever had been buried beneath the mountain wasn't done yet. The air inside the tunnel was thick with dust and static. Irene Ofilia clutched Lila, Evan, and Tommy close as the blue light faded from the walls, leaving only the soft drip of water and the echo of their ragged breathing. When the last pulse of energy subsided, the mine was deathly still. The shards embedded in the walls no longer glowed, but the faint vibration beneath the floor hadn't stopped. It felt like the mountain itself was breathing. Irene rose slowly, scanning the dim cavern. Hollis was gone. His flashlight lay cracked against a stone, its beam sputtering out, but there was no trace of his body, only a scorch mark on the rock where he had stood moments before. Evan's voice trembled. "Did Daddy see it too?" "I think so." Irene softened. Part of me hoped it was true. The children huddled together as she checked the metal box. The shard inside it now pulsed steadily again, brighter than before, as if the burst of light had fed it. The glow spilled between her fingers like liquid moonlight. Tommy pointed at her backpack. "It's getting stronger." "I see it," Irene murmured. "We have to move, now." She led the children out of the chamber, every step crunching through scattered fragments of crystal that glimmered faintly under the beam of her lantern. The tunnel ahead sloped downward, and the air grew colder. Each breath came out as fog. As they moved, Irene noticed faint patterns burned into the rock, like symbols, geometric spirals, and sequences of dots. They weren't natural. Lila noticed them too. "Those weren't here before." Irene said quietly, "They're warnings, or instructions." Evan frowned. "Instructions for what?" She didn't answer. After half an hour of walking, they reached a fork. One tunnel led deeper, the other angled upward toward faint daylight. Irene started for the upper path, but as she turned, the shard in her backpack flared, casting blue light across the walls. From the deeper tunnel came a low hum. Tommy covered his ears. "Make it stop." Irene said, "It's not hurting you," although she wasn't sure she believed it. The hum resonated in her chest, matching her heartbeat, filling her with a strange pull, an instinct that told her the answers she needed were not above ground. She hesitated. "We need to see
What's down there? Lila grabbed her arm. No, Irene, we have to get out. I will get you out, Irene promised. But first I have to understand what this is, what your father found. Otherwise, we'll never be safe. The girl's lip trembled, but she nodded reluctantly. Then we go together. The descent took them deeper than Irene thought possible. The tunnel twisted and narrowed until they had to crawl. Eventually, the rock gave way to smooth metal walls. Cables snaked along the floor. This was no natural cave. This was man-made. Miss Irene, Evan whispered, pointing ahead. Look. At the end of the corridor stood a steel door, half collapsed, but still humming faintly. Above it, faded words were painted in block letters. Project the Zur. Authorized personnel only. Irene brushed her fingers over the letters, her heart pounding. Azure. The blue light? Was Daddy working here? Lila asked. Irene nodded. He must have stumbled into this place after the collapse. He tried to warn someone. The shard in the box began to vibrate violently, the glow spilling out between the seams. The steel door creaked as if responding to the energy. Evan stepped back. It's opening. The massive door shifted, groaning on its rusted hinges. Beyond it, a chamber flickered to life, light sputtering overhead, machines humming faintly after decades of silence. They stepped inside. It was like walking into a forgotten laboratory. Desks were overturned, papers scattered across the floor, equipment sealed under layers of dust. The air smelled of oil and iron. On the far wall, a cracked glass window overlooked a second chamber, a containment room filled with shattered metal pods and crystal fragments scattered across the floor. A single pod remained intact, pulsing faintly with that same ethereal blue light. Lila whispered, "It looks like something alive." Irene moved closer. "Maybe it is." She found a terminal still partially functional, its green display flickering. She wiped the dust away and pressed a key. The screen scrolled with corrupted text. Project Azure status, critical failure. Energy source, sentient response detected. Containment breach, personnel evacuated. Protocol 9, initiate purge, manual override required. Irene's throat tightened. Sentient response. Whatever the shard was, it wasn't just energy. It was alive. The computer beeped softly, then a line of static-filled audio played. This isn't a mineral. It communicates through resonance. The energy isn't from Earth. Shut it down before it learns. Then silence. Lila clung to her sleeve. What does that mean? Irene swallowed hard. It means your father didn't find gold. He found something buried here a long time ago, something that's been waiting. Suddenly, the remaining pod in the containment room hissed. Cracks splintered across its surface. The hum grew louder, shaking the walls. Evan shouted, "It's breaking!" "Get back!" Irene yelled, pushing the children behind her. The pod exploded outward in a burst of blue mist. A shape emerged, tall, almost human but not quite. Its body shimmered with translucent skin and veins of light. Its face was featureless, yet I felt its gaze, calm, ancient, and unbearably sad. Lila gasped, "Is that a person?" Irene's voice trembled. "No, it's something older." The being tilted its head, its light pulsing in rhythm with the shard in Irene's backpack. Then, in a voice that wasn't sound, but vibration, it spoke inside her mind. "You carry a fragment of me. Return it, and I will sleep again." Irene slowly unzipped her pack. The shard glowed brightly, as if recognizing its other half. She stepped forward cautiously. "If I give it back, will you stop the tremors, the light?" "Yes," the voice resonated, "but only if your kind never returns. The mountain remembers. The mountain guards." She hesitated, looking back at the children. "Will it hurt them?" "They are not to blame," the being said. "They woke what others buried." The mountain rumbled again, cracks spidering through the floor, rocks fell from above. Irene reached out, holding the box toward the being. The shard inside lifted on its own, hovering in midair, glowing so brightly it painted every shadow blue. Then it drifted toward the being and sank into its chest like a returning breath. The tremors stopped instantly. For a heartbeat, everything was silent.
The being looked at her one last time, its voice softer now. The mountain sleeps. Keep its secret. And then it faded into mist. The light dimmed. Irene dropped to her knees, exhausted. Lila rushed to her side. It's gone? Irene nodded slowly. It's over. But as they turned to leave, a faint voice crackled through the terminal speaker again. One last echo of the old recording.
If containment is broken, the Azure entity will adapt. It learns through contact. Irene froze. She looked down at her arm, where faint veins of blue light glowed beneath her skin, pulsing like a heartbeat. The mine was silent, except for the dripping of water and the faint echo of their footsteps. Irene Ofilia led the three children through the metallic corridor, her pulse racing, her arm still faintly aglow under the skin. The light pulsed softly, almost like it had a rhythm, alive, aware. Lila, ever perceptive, noticed first. "Miss Irene, your arm," she whispered. Irene stopped, pulling her sleeve down quickly, but not fast enough. The faint lines of blue still shimmered beneath the fabric, tracing delicate vein-like paths toward her wrist. "It's just a reflection," Irene lied, though her voice trembled. Evan frowned. "No, it's not. It's the same color as the crystals." Tommy clutched her hand, his small fingers trembling. "Are you turning into one of those things?" She knelt, forcing a steady smile. "No, sweetheart. I'm still me. We just need to get out before this place falls apart." But she didn't believe her own words. The warmth spreading through her veins wasn't normal. It felt like energy, like a pulse connecting her to the heart of the mountain itself. She could hear faint vibrations through the rock now, each one like a whisper from deep underground. As they made their way back toward the collapsed tunnel, the steel walls around them began to hum faintly again, reacting to her presence. Lights flickered on where her hand brushed the wall. Old circuits sparked back to life. Lila stared. "You're controlling it." "No," Irene said softly, shaking her head. "It's controlling me." The tunnel opened into a larger shaft, the same one they'd first entered. It smelled of burned air and ozone. The ceiling was cracked wide, and beams of daylight spilled through the fissures like divine rays. Irene shielded her eyes. "Come on, almost there." But when they climbed out into the open forest, the mountain had changed. The trees near the entrance shimmered faintly with the same iridescent hue as the shards. Even the soil glowed in spots, as though something beneath the surface had awakened and was spreading outward. Evan whispered, "It's following us." Irene tightened her jaw. "No, it's bleeding through. The energy's escaping." She turned toward the old cabin in the distance, the broken one she'd bought for $25. It stood crooked against the slope, its roof caved in, its windows gone. Smoke from earlier still drifted from the nearby trees. That was their only shelter. "We'll rest there," she said, though her voice wavered. The hike up the hill was harder this time. Irene's steps faltered, her body heavy, her vision shimmering with occasional blue flashes of light. Once she stumbled and caught herself on a rock, and where her hand touched, the stone melted slightly, not from heat, but from some kind of vibration that rearranged it like clay. Lila saw. "You're changing, aren't you?" Irene didn't answer. Her silence was answer enough. When they reached the cabin, the children immediately began gathering blankets and what little food remained.
The interior looked even worse after the tremors. Half the wall had collapsed, and the trap door to the mine below was completely buried. Irene sat by the old stone hearth, pressing her glowing hand against her chest to muffle the throbbing pain. The light under her skin was spreading now, up her neck, across her shoulder. It didn't hurt, it just felt like the mountain's heartbeat inside her. "Miss Irene," Lila said quietly, sitting beside her, "if that thing inside you is part of the mountain, does that mean you can talk to it?" Irene looked at her sharply. "Talk to it?" "You said you could hear vibrations. Maybe it's trying to tell you something." Irene hesitated. The idea was insane, but so was everything else that had happened. Slowly, she closed her eyes and focused on the pulse. At first, there was only silence. Then, faintly, like a whisper through the trees, she heard words forming in the rhythm of her heartbeat. Containment breached, energy dispersal imminent, restore balance. She gasped, eyes snapping open. It's warning us. The shards under the mountain, they're still active. If they keep spreading, this whole region could collapse." Lila's face paled. "How do we stop it?" "I think," she paused, the realization dawning slowly. "I think I'm the only one who can." Evan shook his head. "No! You can't go back down there alone." "I have to." She reached for his shoulder, her glowing fingers leaving faint trails of blue where they touched his jacket. "Your father died trying to contain this. I can't let it destroy everything he tried to protect." "But what if you don't come back?" Lila whispered. Irene smiled weakly. "Then you make sure no one ever digs here again." The ground rumbled again, stronger this time. The dishes on the shelf rattled. A deep, resonant hum filled the air, rolling through the valley like thunder. Outside, the trees swayed even though there was no wind. Their trunks glimmered faintly, their leaves catching blue light like mirrors. The mountain was alive. Tommy screamed, "It's shaking again!" Irene stood, shouldering her backpack. "Get to the ridge. Stay together. I'll find you when it's done." Lila grabbed her wrist. "You don't have to do this alone." "Yes, I do." Irene's voice broke. "I brought it out of the ground. It chose me when I touched it. Now I have to finish what your father started." She pulled free gently and stepped outside. The air was charged, every breath humming with static. Lightning, not white but blue, flashed in the clouds forming above the peak. Irene began the climb toward the fissure that led back into the core of the mountain. Every step she took left faint glowing footprints behind her, like starlight pressed into the soil. Halfway up, she stopped, looking back. The children were watching from the ridge, their faces streaked with tears, small against the backdrop of the awakening mountain. She raised her hand in a silent promise, then turned and disappeared into the light. The descent was faster this time. The tunnel seemed to guide her. The blue veins in her skin illuminated the path. The air shimmered with energy so dense it made her hair rise. At the heart of the mine, the old containment chamber, she found what she feared most. The shards that had gone dark before were now glowing again, brighter than ever. They pulsed in synchrony, a heartbeat that matched her own. Her vision blurred. For a moment she saw through them, not as rock, but as memory. The past unfolded around her, scientists in white suits, reactors humming, light contained within glass cells. Then the explosion, screams, silence. And beneath it all, a voice. You are the bridge. Restore balance. Her knees buckled. I don't know how, she shouted. But the shards pulsed again, this time in rhythm with her breath. The meaning came not as words, but instinct. She understood now. She didn't need to shut it off. She needed to become the seal. Irene placed both her glowing hands on the largest shard embedded in the wall. Energy surged through her body, searing and beautiful. The blue light flared outward, filling every crack, every crevice. The tremors stopped. Outside, the clouds broke apart. The trees stilled. The mountain sighed. The chamber filled with light so bright it turned everything to white, then faded slowly, leaving only silence. When the children reached the cabin again, the air was calm. The mountain was still. Lila fell to her knees, tears streaking her face.
But those who lived near the base of the mountain whispered. They spoke of tremors that came from nowhere, of faint blue glows seen through the fog at night, and of a woman's voice, soft and sorrowful, carried on the wind. For Leela, Evan, and Tommy, the whispers were a wound that never healed. They had been found wandering days after the light faded, cold, exhausted, and half delirious, by a rescue team searching the ridges. The authorities called it a localized collapse, a geothermal event. No one mentioned the shards. No one believed their story. But the children remembered everything. They had been living since then in a foster home in the nearby town of Berkstead, a quiet mountain village with narrow streets and a single school. Leela, now 16, had become protective of her brothers, never letting them out of her sight. Evan still dreamed of the tunnels. He would wake in the middle of the night, gasping, hearing the hum of the crystals. Tommy, the youngest, spoke the least, but sometimes, when he played in the snow, faint trails of blue light would follow his fingers, like sparks hidden in frost. None of them told anyone. One evening, after dinner, Leela found a letter waiting on the windowsill. No one had seen who left it. The envelope was plain, unmarked, just her name written in careful, looping handwriting. Irene Ofilia. Her breath caught. She hadn't used Irene's surname. No one in Berkstead even knew that name. She tore the letter open. Inside was a single sheet of old paper, folded once. It smelled faintly of pine and smoke. The handwriting was the same neat script Irene used in her notes by the cabin fireplace. If you're reading this, the mountain is at peace, for now. But balance is fragile. If the light stirs again, return to where the heart beats. The seal may need its keeper. You were meant to survive for a reason. Irene. Leela pressed her hand over her mouth, tears blurring the ink. She's alive. She has to be. Evan looked up from the corner, his voice quiet. What if she isn't? What if it's her, but not her anymore? Leela shook her head. No, she wouldn't leave this for me if she was gone. Tommy tugged her sleeve. Can we go back, Leela, to the cabin? Leela hesitated. Every rational thought told her no. The mountain was unstable, the area restricted, the weather dangerous. But something deeper tugged at her, the same pull Irene must have felt that day. Yes, she said finally. We're going back. The hike up Mount Olin was harder in winter. Snowdrifts reached their knees, and the path Irene had once cleared was buried beneath ice. But the mountain was quiet, and the air strangely warm near the summit, as if something beneath the surface still breathed. When they reached the ridge, the old cabin stood exactly as they'd left it, half collapsed,
its roof sagging under snow, its door swinging slightly in the wind. Yet when Leela stepped closer, she saw something that froze her in place. The ground around the cabin, once barren, was now covered in faint, glowing lines, etched into the snow like veins of light, the same pattern she'd seen on Irene's arm. Tommy gasped. "She's still here!" Evan knelt beside one of the glowing lines. "It's warm," he whispered. "Feel it." Leela crouched, pressing her gloved hand to the pattern. Heat pulsed beneath the ice, steady and alive. Suddenly the air shimmered, and a faint hum rose from the ground, a deep, gentle resonance that vibrated through their bones, the same sound they'd heard in the tunnels. And then, faintly, a woman's voice. "You kept your promise." Leela looked around, tears already spilling down her cheeks. "Irene?" The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "The mountain sleeps because of you, but its heart still beats through me, and through you." The glow under the snow brightened, forming a pattern that spread outward from the cabin like the roots of a tree, beautiful, intricate, alive. Evan whispered, "She became part of it." Leela swallowed hard. "She is the mountain now." The voice softened. "Leave this place to rest. Live. The children of the mountain are safe now." Then the light dimmed, and the hum faded into silence once more. Leela knelt in the snow, trembling. "We'll come back," she whispered. "I promise." That night they camped near the ridge instead of leaving. The stars burned cold and bright above, and for the first time since that day, Leela felt peace. But as she drifted toward sleep, she saw something strange across the valley, a faint blue shimmer weaving between the trees, like fireflies forming patterns in the dark. She sat up, watching. The shakes shifted slowly, gracefully, until they formed the outline of a woman, standing tall, her hair trailing like smoke. Irene. The figure raised a hand in silent farewell, then dissolved into the forest light. Spring came late that year. When the snow melted, scientists returned to study the geothermal phenomenon. They brought sensors, drills, and questions. Leela, now living in town with her brothers, watched from afar, her stomach twisting with dread. The men climbed toward the ridge, toward the cabin. That night, the tremors started again. She woke to the sound of a deep, rhythmic rumble beneath the earth, shaking the window panes. The blue light she'd thought dawned forever flickered on the distant mountain peak. Evan burst into her room. "It's happening again!" Tommy cried. "She's calling us!" Leela looked toward the glowing ridge, her heart pounding. The mountain was awake. She grabbed her boots. "Then we go back. One last time." As they ran through the dark forest, the ground trembled harder. The snow melt glowed faintly underfoot, spreading like veins of light toward the sky. When they reached the cabin, it was gone, collapsed entirely. In its place was a crater filled with mist, pulsing blue. From within the mist came a voice, not desperate or fearful this time, but resolute, powerful. "The balance is shifting. The seal weakens." Leela stepped forward. "What do we do?" "You know," the voice said gently. "It is your turn now." The glow beneath her feet surged upward, wrapping around her hands. The same markings that had once covered Irene's skin appeared faintly on her wrists. Evan and Tommy watched, wide-eyed. "Leela," Evan whispered, "it's choosing you." She looked down at her glowing hands, the light reflecting in her tears. "Then I'll finish what she started." The mountain's hum deepened, surrounding them like a heartbeat. And as the mist enveloped the ridge, the children vanished into the light, just as Irene had months before. In the valley below, the townspeople woke to silence. The tremors stopped. The mountain was still again.
but those who looked up that morning swore they saw a faint blue glow cresting the peak, gentle, constant, like a pulse. And those who listened closely said they could hear two heartbeats now, beneath the stone. The mountain, it seemed, had found its new keeper. 5 years had passed since the mountain last trembled. Mount Olin stood calm again, majestic, snow-capped, and silent. The villagers at its base believed the strange glowing had been a trick of light or a chemical reaction deep within the rocks. But to those who still remembered the events of that winter, the quake, the humming earth, and the missing children, it was never just geology. It was alive. In the valley, life had gone on. The townspeople rebuilt their damaged homes. The forest reclaimed the trails. Tourists returned to the mountain slopes. But the story of Irene Ofilia and the children she saved refused to die.
He claimed that one evening, while tending his flock near the northern ridge, he saw 3 figures standing at the edge of the mist, 2 young men and a woman, glowing faintly with pale blue light. They stood hand in hand, watching the horizon, as if listening to something far away. When Abel approached, the light faded. The trio vanished like smoke in the wind. His story spread quickly, and soon people began calling them the Azure Guardians, spirits said to protect the valley from whatever slumbered beneath Mount Olin. At first, the townsfolk treated it as a campfire tale, something to tell tourists. But then, more stories emerged. Miners claimed to hear whispers in the tunnels warning them before cave-ins. Hikers spoke of soft blue lights guiding them out of fog. Children playing in the forest sometimes returned with strange glowing stones that pulsed like tiny hearts. And every year, on the anniversary of the quake, a deep rumble shook the mountain. Never enough to cause damage, but enough to remind everyone that the heart of Mount Olin still beat. One spring morning, a convoy of black trucks rolled into Birkstead. On the side of each vehicle, painted in clean white letters, were the words, "Thorne Geophysical Research." Dr. Kira Thorne was no ordinary scientist. Sharp-eyed, deliberate, and skeptical to the core, she had spent years studying unexplained geothermal anomalies across the region. When she heard about Mount Olin's living mountain rumors and the mysterious disappearances of Irene Ofilia and 3 children, she came looking for answers. Superstition, she told the mayor when she arrived, but superstition often hides truth. Her team set up camp near the ridge. Using ground-penetrating scanners, they began mapping the Earth's interior. What they found startled even Kira. Deep beneath the mountain lay a vast crystalline chamber, larger than any natural formation they'd ever recorded. And at its center pulsed a slow, rhythmic signal. Not random, not seismic, almost biological. A heartbeat. That night, as Kira reviewed the data alone, she felt a vibration under her feet. The instruments on her desk began to hum softly. Then, just for an instant, every screen went blue. A whisper filled the air, so faint she thought she imagined it. "Leave this place." Kira froze. The voice was soft but firm, female. The words echoed in her mind long after they stopped. She shut down the monitors, shaking her head. "Fatigue," she muttered. "Nothing more." But when she looked outside her tent, the ridge above the forest glowed faintly, pulsing like a slow breath. The next morning, one of Kira's assistants uncovered something unexpected while clearing debris near the old cabin site. Charred pages, bound in brittle leather. A journal. The name on the cover was still legible. Irene Ofilia. Kira turned each fragile page carefully. The entries were written in neat handwriting, describing life in the cabin, the strange orphans, and finally, the discovery of the underground tunnels. But the last entry stopped her breath cold. The mountain's heart is not stone. It remembers. It binds to those who carry love strong enough to face it. I hear it calling to me again. If I do not return, the next will rise. The ink beneath the final line bled into a faint symbol, a circle with 3 dots around it, the same pattern that appeared in the seismic data beneath the ridge. Kira stared at it for a long moment. Not superstition, something real. That evening, the tremors began again. The snow on the peak shifted in long ripples, though there was no wind. Trees leaned as if drawn toward the summit. And then the light came. Brilliant blue lines surged through the ground, tracing old paths and ruins, the same veins of light that had once surrounded Irene's cabin. Kira grabbed her radio. "Everyone, pull back to the base, now!" But before she could move, the ground split open beneath her boots. She tumbled down a slope, sliding through snow and ash until she hit something solid, smooth, warm, and glowing faintly beneath her palms. The crystal. It pulsed once, twice, and then she heard them. Voices. "You shouldn't have come. It's not ready. The balance must hold." Kira looked up and saw them. 3 figures standing in the mist. The woman in front, tall, dark-haired, her eyes the same deep blue as the light itself, spoke first. "You must leave this place before it wakes again." Kira's heart pounded. "Who are you?" The woman tilted her head slightly, sadness flickering in her gaze. "Once I was Irene Ofilia. Now I am what remains." Kira stumbled backward. "You're alive?" "Not as you understand it." Behind Irene stood 2 young men, Evan and Tommy, silent, watching. Their outlines shimmered faintly, more energy than flesh. Irene stepped closer, her voice carrying a weight that made the air hum. "The heart of the mountain is weakening. Each time it's disturbed, the seal falters. If it breaks fully, the thing beneath will awaken and no one will stop it." Kira tried to speak, but the glow around them intensified, shaking the ground. "What's beneath?" she shouted. Irene's eyes darkened. "Not what. Who?" A shock wave of blue light burst outward, throwing Kira back. When she opened her eyes, the ridge was empty. The glow had faded. Only one thing remained, a fragment of crystal, warm and pulsing faintly in her hand. Kira returned to camp in silence, clutching the shard. It vibrated faintly, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. She placed it under her microscope and gasped. Inside the crystal, tiny patterns shifted like living cells, rearranging into words. "Do not dig deeper. Seal the mountain. The world is not ready for what dreams below." She dropped the shard, trembling. Outside, the night wind howled, carrying a faint whisper down the slopes. "The keeper watches. Do not wake her enemy." That night, Mount Olin went silent again, but Kira Thorne could not sleep. She sat up until dawn, staring at the glowing shard beside her cot. Whatever she had awakened wasn't finished, and deep beneath the mountain, where the crystals pulsed like veins of a sleeping giant, something shifted. For the first time in centuries, the heart stirred, and this time, it was not content to dream.
The storm came without warning. By dawn, Mount Olin was hidden behind a wall of black clouds, lightning flashing across its jagged crown. In the valley below, villagers gathered in fear as tremors rolled through the ground, rattling windows and toppling fences. Dr. Kira Thorne stood outside her tent, wind whipping her hair, the glowing crystal fragment clenched tightly in her fist. The shard pulsed faster now, urgent, alive, as if it were part of a beating heart buried beneath the mountain. She knew what it meant. The seal was breaking.
At first, it was only sound, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through the air, the same sound Irene had described in her journals. Then came the light. Blue fire raced through the mountain's veins, tracing rivers and roots, spreading across the snow like a living web. The sky lit up as if dawn had arrived too soon. Kira's instruments went haywire, their readings off the charts. "It's generating energy," she whispered to herself, not releasing it, creating it. Then the ground split open. A roar echoed through the valley, so deep and low it rattled her bones. From the fissure at the ridge, a column of blue light erupted, piercing the clouds. Within it, shapes moved, figures of light, familiar and strange. And at the center stood Irene Ofilia. Her form flickered between woman and energy, her eyes glowing like molten sapphire. "Kiera," Irene's voice echoed in the wind. "You should have left." Kiera took a trembling step forward. "You told me to protect the seal. Tell me how." "You cannot seal what has already begun to wake." The ground beneath Irene shuddered, cracking wider. From deep within, a second pulse throbbed, slower, darker. Kira felt it in her chest, a presence vast and ancient, stirring for the first time in centuries. "It's her," Irene whispered, "the mother beneath." The mountain split open in a jagged line, revealing a cavern that glowed with violent crimson light, and something rose from the depths. Not a creature, not in any form the human mind could easily grasp, but an immense, shifting silhouette of crystal and molten rock, veins of fire threading through its translucent form. The sound it made was neither speech nor roar, but a resonance, a vibration that made the sky itself tremble. Kira dropped to her knees. "What is that?" "The first heart," Irene said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "It was born with the world. When people came, they mined her bones, tore out her veins. The mountain was her cradle and her prison." Evan and Tommy appeared behind Irene, their outlines sharp and bright. They raised their hands, streams of blue energy flowing toward the fissure. The creature below roared again, sending a shock wave that cracked the earth. The air shimmered with unbearable heat. "We can't hold her longer!" Evan shouted. "Then I'll help you!" Kira screamed. Kira pressed her hand against the crystal shard. It flared to life, fusing with her skin, spreading light up her arm in jagged lines. She felt the hum of the mountain flood her veins, the rhythm of the earth, the pulse of molten stone, the song of the buried heart. For a moment she saw it all. Irene merging with the mountain, the orphans transformed into keepers, the ancient force below dreaming of freedom. And then she heard Irene's voice inside her mind this time. "There's only one way to stop it. The heart must choose a keeper again." Kiera clenched her jaw. "If it means ending this, then let it be me." The blue light exploded around her, forming a circle of energy that connected her to Irene, Evan, and Tommy. Together, they channeled their power downward into the rift. The creature below screamed again, an echo that shattered clouds and split lightning across the sky. Crystals along the ridge burst into blinding light. The fissure began to close, inch by inch, the ground knitting itself shut under the weight of their power. But the strain was unbearable. Kira felt her heartbeat falter, her vision blur. She wasn't strong enough.
Then Irene's voice, soft and fierce, filled her mind again. "You are enough. You carry what I once did." And suddenly she saw them all, the memories, the lives, the love that had shaped the mountain's heart. Irene holding the children, the laughter that once filled the broken cabin, the promise to protect what others could not understand. Kiara screamed, pouring every last ounce of her life into the light. The mountain roared one final time, and then silence. When the storm cleared, Mount Oslin was calm again. No blue light, no tremors, no sound. The fissure was gone, replaced by smooth stone that gleamed faintly under the sun. The rescue teams that arrived days later found Dr. Kiara Thorne's equipment abandoned, her tent collapsed by wind. No trace of her remained, only a ring of glassy rock near the ridge, still warm to the touch. The villagers began to whisper again. Some said she fled, driven mad by the mountain. Others said she had joined the Azure Guardians. And those who climbed the ridge at night claimed to see 4 figures standing where the fissure once was. 3 children and a woman of blue light beside a new figure, bright and radiant, her hand raised toward the sky. Years later, when the next quake hit, it was gentle, barely enough to rattle a teacup. But deep within the mountain, something stirred. Not the mother beneath this time, but something else. A heartbeat. The rhythm was steady, human, alive. And if one listened closely enough, buried beneath the pulse of molten stone, a whisper could still be heard. Irene Ofilia, Kiara Thorne, the mountain keeps watch. In the valley below, the forest grew denser, greener. The soil was richer, the rivers clearer. The villagers noticed that crops flourished near the base of Mount Oslin, even in winter. On certain nights, when the moonlight hit the peaks just right, blue lights shimmered faintly along the slopes like veins of stars hidden beneath the earth. Children born in Berkstead began to dream of a woman with sapphire eyes who whispered gentle words, "Protect the mountain, protect each other." The legend lived on. They called her the Guardian of the Heart. And though centuries would pass, those who dared climb Mount Oslin swore that if they stood at the summit and listened carefully enough, they could still hear 4 heartbeats beneath their feet, steady, strong, and eternal. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.